What's poppin', y'all? Welcome back to another YouTube video, and today we're taking a look at a series, and this is a really interesting series. It is a first series for James Gunn's new DCEU, which is basically his fresh start to the DC universe. He is now the Kevin Feige for DC, hoping to improve DC's status, hoping to increase DC's popularity and get everyone back on the side of DC. And how he's trying to do that is through Creature Commandos, Superman, and he has a thing where he's going to sort of link back to previous sections of the DCEU to say what old sections are canon, because it's not all canon. So, because he did say that the second Suicide Squad movie was canon, because of this series, that technically means the first one's canon as well, because Harley Quinn mentioned about the first Suicide Squad movie in the second one. So, you know, that technically means that the first one's canon as well. So with his whole plot line of saying if it's mentioned it's canon, doesn't really work because some movies reference other movies. So, you know, technically that means it's all canon and all linked in. But without any further delay, let's take a look at what Google has to say about Creature Commandos. It has one season, came out in 2024, has 7 episodes, all at roughly around 20 minutes each. So you can easily watch it within 2 hours. 2.5 hours, and it has a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb and a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. A Black Ops team is formulated out of prisoners laying the foundation for the Suicide Squad. That's actually wrong. So everybody thought that this series was going to be before the Suicide Squad, but actually it takes place after the Suicide Squad, because we have Rick Flag, which is Rick Flag's dad, Rick Flag Sr., sort of trying to deal with his son's death and taking over the Suicide Squad, and because of how Task Force X was done, they're no longer allowed to use humans in these tests and these experiments. So they do use the Bride, which is a corpse. We use Nema, who's a fish lady. We use Dr. Phosphorus, who is a fire skeleton of gamma radiation, and we use Weasel, and then all of these guys go on a mission with G.I. Robot to protect a princess. They end up discovering the bride's history, the bride's past, falling in love with her creator, finding a necklace, and then taking it back. G.I. Robot does a self-sacrifice and kills all the bad guys, but gets himself killed in the process. Nema is unfortunately upset by that, because Nema actually had a little bit of a relationship with him and was the only one that tried to make friends with him, and he was quite friendly towards Nema. Nema and then the bride start to get along, because when they go back to the prison, when they go back to Argus, they end up sort of sitting together, and then they get sent back out to kill the princess that they were just told to protect, because the girl that was trying to kill the princess gave Amanda Waller foresight, showing that she's a villain, and then Clayface backed the woman, but they didn't know it's Clayface. He was pretending to be someone else. So Rick Flag doesn't believe that Nema would be evil, so he goes and finds Clayface and fights Clayface, gets his back broken like Batman, and then he's in hospital for the rest of the series. However, he did team up with Frankenstein to fight Clayface, and then Frankenstein heads over to the Bride, and unfortunately gets murked by the Bride. But he's not actually dead, he survived, and he goes to sit with a gypsy lady in the middle of the forest with a dog, and the Bride, Phosphorus, Nema, and Weasel then get into a scrap, and they get split off. We then get a look at each one of their stories individually, with Dr. Phosphorus being a scientist who got attacked by the Mafia and thrown into his machine, which gave him superpowers. He went on a killing spree and killed them all. We have Nema, who was a child who had her lungs on the outside of her body and she struggled to breathe, and her dad did experiments to try and make her life easier and turned her into a fish. And then Weasel is just a weasel who allegedly killed 8 babies, and he never actually did that. He was actually trying to protect them, but because he was seen as a monster, people tried to kill him. They then send Nema in under the water to kill the princess. Amanda Waller then finds out that Clayface was lying and that she cannot be trusted, so the mission is under false pretenses and they're going to war for no reason. So she calls up the government of that country and is like, hey, stop our guys from killing your guys. And the company's like, oh, you know what, I forgive you, that's fine, all good, chill, we're not going to kill you. But Nemo was already under the water fighting with the princess, and Nemo gets stabbed and killed, and then the bride kills the princess anyway because she knows that she's a bad girl, that she's a bad guy, and that she's not worth saving. They then leave the castle, and that's where the series ends, with the bride now being the leader of the Creature Commandos, which now has a couple of new members, which is a Bat Lady, a Mummy Dude, and King Shark. That's the story as a whole, and I'm going to be honest, the art style is a little bit ugly and does flop and switch between 2D and 3D, which I didn't really like. On the wider shots with the wider angle sort of areas, the characters had a 3D model, which looked quite uncanny and didn't really fit the art style, and I didn't like it, and it definitely threw me off. And I've already explained in past videos that I'm not a huge fan of cartoons or animes changing media or changing medium halfway through for whatever reason to add a 3D model. I know that it's cheaper to do so and easier to do so, but it just throws you out of the whole story and looks really off when you do try and do it, and I'm not a huge fan of it, but I really like this story, and if I had a nickel every time James Gunn directed a show or movie about a ragtag group of rapscallions who come together and form a family, I would have 3 fucking nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's strange that it's happened 3 fucking times. We have the Guardians franchise, and we have the second Suicide Squad movie, and now we have Creature Commandos. This seems to be James Gunn's specialty. This seems to be what he's really good at, and it gets right into the characters straight off the bat, showing them all off, showing them what they can do, and then as the story goes on, showing us their dark history, their dark backstory, which shows that they're just misunderstood and they're not actually monsters, they're not actually these evil creatures, they are just misunderstood people. And just because of the way they look, they get treated like they're worthless and that they're monsters, and that is basically the message that I got from this. And because they've been treated like monsters and because everyone thinks that they're monsters, they decide, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna give them the monster that they think I am. And the character designs are actually really cool. I haven't heard of many of these characters before. The only one that I was really familiar with was Weasel and Dr. Phosphorus. The rest of them were all new characters, and the only one that I really liked out of the new ones was Nema, and I was actually really fucking upset when she did croak and when she did die at the end of the story. I thought that was really fucking upsetting because I liked her character, and she was the nicest one of them all, and she didn't deserve that. However, it does give our main hero the motivation to, continue with this mission and continue to do this sort of Creature Commandos type thing. And I'm interested to see how far this characters will go in the future and who will come back. Obviously, Nema and G.I. Robot are dead, and I'm a little upset that G.I. Robot died in the second episode. However, he did get his main story told in that episode. He got his backstory told, and normally in animes and TV shows, when you get an in-depth backstory, a little bit of a sad backstory, it normally means the character's gonna die. However, they tried to flip that expectation on its head by throwing off which characters would die in which episodes, because the first episode was all about the bride and her backstory, second was G.I. Robot, third, I do believe, was Phosphorus, fourth was Weasel, and fifth was obviously girl Nema, and 2 out of those 5 were the ones that actually ended up dying. So, it tried to switch it up a little bit and not do the status quo. However, the 2 saddest stories, I believe, were G.I. Robots and Nema's, and those were sad in ways which the robot was kept alive and separated from his company, and he didn't even get to say goodbye to his company. He didn't even know that they were dead. No one told him that they were dead. No one told him anything about his previous company, which were his friends. They were the people that actually respected him, and he learnt a lot from them, and he never actually got a chance to say goodbye, which is really upsetting, and he is now gonna go see them until the end of the series, where they bring him back as a fucking Hulkbuster suit, which I think is bollocks. It just takes away from his death, but he is a robot, so I guess they can bring him back whenever they please, because he isn't a real boy. He's just a robot. Frankenstein, I feel like, was a little bit of a one-note character. He was just here to love the bride, and that's all that he really wants to do, and that's all that he really does throughout the series, which does cause him to get a little bit boring, a little bit stale, and he's just doing stuff because he wants the bride's love, and the bride feels like a much more complex character than Frankenstein does, because she has more motive, she has more sort of story to her, rather than him just being, I want a bride, she's my bride, let's go get my bride. He definitely feels like a very boring character, which can be whittled down to basically this one trope, which gets very boring after a while, and I didn't really care when he was on screen. He didn't really do anything. He was just the big muscle brute of the story, and Phosphorus was the sarcastic one, which I loved. I thought he was funny. The best scene was when he melted through the tank and stuck his middle finger up and melted his middle finger through these guys' faces. That was the best sort of moment in the series. However, his powers do confuse me a little bit. I don't understand how his powers work, because he complained that he could never be touched without people's hands burning off. When Weasel bit him, Weasel burnt his mouth, yet he could put his hand on Neema's shoulder, and he could wear clothes without them burning or tearing off. So I don't really get how his powers work. He could also throw fireballs and burn the ground, but he didn't burn the task force remote. So does he control what he can and can't burn? I don't have a fucking clue, gonna be honest. And I also liked it when he was there stopping the guard from opening the door with Rick having sex. I thought that was quite funny and comedic. However, it did go on for a little bit longer than I would have liked, and it got very awkward very quickly. But to begin with, it was quite funny. Overall, I do really like this series, and I am excited, and this series does give me hope for the future of DC. It is just unfortunate that we're not going to be getting many LEGO DC sets, because James Gunn seems to be going with the more mature route for his DC universe. So overall, I think this is a solid 9 out of 10 series. I hope you all enjoyed this YouTube video. I'll see you all next one. Hope you all have an excellent day, and goodbye. Stay home and stay safe.